Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss another brain fart of a policy promise from our next Prime Minister, that of the mythical bonfire of EU red tape that the Brexiteers keep talking about. But there's a reason it has not yet happened. It will be quite insane. So the real question is not whether it's a good idea or not, but whether our next Prime Minister is insane or not. Oh look, the favourite to win is Liz Truss. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, as part of the Tory leadership contest, Liz Truss has promised a few things of dubious wisdom. I discussed her tax cut promises yesterday, I think. Today, it's her promise to scrap all remaining EU regulations by the end of 2023. And as a little aside, Sunak has promised something similar as well. But we'll focus on Truss as she's the favourite. Now, what this would mean is basically about 15 months after she becomes Prime Minister, if she wins the contest, they'd be gone. Now, usual comments to make here. First, EU regulations are in effect in the EU. Liz Truss has no authority in the EU, not now, not ever, and so has no power to scrap any EU regulations. So when she talks about scrapping EU regulations, she doesn't mean that. So what is she talking about? It's regulations for the UK. They're not EU regulations, they're UK regulations. You read them, you won't find references to the EU. We used to have EU regulations as members of the EU, but we spent years going through them, committing a lot of civil service resources to go through them and convert them into purely UK regulations. So it's false to call them EU regulations. I have heard some journalists rather more sensibly calling them legacy EU regulations. That's fine, we can understand what that means. But the problem with making this sound like a suitable policy is that the whole concept is predicated on the notion that some foreign group called the EU, which wasn't foreign at all because we were part of it, imposed these laws on us against our will. But it's a nonsense. Bear in mind that the UK proposed or supported well over 90% of all EU laws in place at the time of the referendum. That means that the laws and regulations that we have on our statute books right now, the legacy regulations, which were implemented as part of an EU-wide proposal, would have been there anyway. So creating a system whereby these laws and regulations simply lapse at the end of 2023 if positive action isn't taken to stop it, which can't be done because there are too many, means losing laws that even if we had never been in the EU, we'd still have had, because we thought they were a good idea. Our own government and parliament thought they were a good idea. Because Truss isn't talking about going through each legacy rule and considering whether or not we still want it. That would take years. If she wants to do that, fine, knock yourself out. That's not what she's talking about. You know, she's talking about putting a timer on every single one. Every single rule and regulation, every single act of parliament, every single statutory instrument that was put in place while we were EU members that was also an EU-wide scheme in 15 months. Technically, I suppose 16 months, but you can't actually do it at Christmas, so you're talking 15 months. Any that are not specifically saved by direct act of minister or parliament, I don't know which she's got planned, will automatically lapse. Overnight, a load of regulations will just vanish. They call them red tape. But what they call red tape, we call consumer protections, workers' rights, environmental standards. And it's not even like this will be good for the owners of businesses. Because you might think, oh, they're thinking about the owners of businesses. No, it will make it much harder for those owners of businesses to export their products. Take goods, for example. If our producers don't have to observe the same high standards as the EU customers will have to be wary. They can't accept goods that aren't to the standards that their market requires. Now, our producers still have to maintain EU standards to sell in the EU, so there'll actually be more red tape to deal with. They'll still have to deal with that EU red tape, only it'll be more difficult because they will have to prove that they haven't taken advantage of the legally lower standards that our government has enabled. Because the EU won't be able to accept UK standards because they'll be too low. It may also mean tighter checks on all British goods entering the single market for fear of false declarations. You know, smuggling is a great fear, and checks are always a risk-based activity based on what you think is the likelihood of smuggling. It'll certainly mean the EU considering tariffs on British products as well, as permitted in the Trading Cooperation Agreement. Mind you, we may not have to worry about that, because if Truss goes ahead with her Northern Ireland Protocol Bill nonsense, then by the end of 2023, we may not have a Trading Cooperation Agreement anymore. Be especially damaging for financial services, I gather, as well. Also completely impractical. Consider what this task entails. Never mind the extra parliamentary time needed for it. You'd need dedicated civil servants to go over the ridiculous number of Acts of Parliament and thousands of other statutes. This is work that they're currently not doing, right? No one's doing this task right now. So this means you'd need to hire a load of extra civil servants to do this task, or more probably do the tasks that the more experienced civil servants won't be doing while they engage in this self-defeating nonsense. Well, that means a massive increase in public spending on the civil servants. Hang on a minute. Aren't the government, no matter who takes over, talking about slimming the civil service down again, getting rid of a load of civil servants? So we're already going to have fewer civil servants, who are already too few to cope with the extra workload of Brexit. Jacob Rees-Mogg says, oh, we've got a load of extra civil servants for Brexit, we don't need them now. Brexit's still going on, in case you hadn't noticed. Now we're going to dump a load of extra work into their trays. Simply can't be done without telling them to ignore other vital work. Then you consider what businesses will think of this. When a serious legislature produces new laws or regulations which will impact businesses, they pass them and then set a date for them to come online. It's not straight away. For example, I noticed Skittles have been knackered by the EU. They recently concluded that an additive, titanium dioxide, couldn't be found to be safe for human consumption, so they're banning its use in the EU. But they passed this, I think it was last year, but it doesn't come into effect until next month. So they gave businesses time to adapt. There are some rules that are far more far-reaching, and it could be years before, after being passed, that it comes online. Sometimes several years sometimes. It's all about making sure that businesses have the time to make the changes without too much disruption to their operations. If businesses based in Britain read this proposal from Truss and thought that it was serious, I can only imagine what they'd think of it. Not only are we talking about a massive change in the regulatory framework of their business, but with only 15 months to prepare. Only it's worse than that, because they don't get 15 months to prepare, because they don't know which regulations are going and which are staying. Out of the thousands of regulations, maybe 100 would apply to their business, let's say. When will they find out which ones will still apply by the end of 2023? No idea. The proposal is for them all to lapse except the ones that someone thinks should be retained. And they're going to spend those 15 months working out. So a few days potentially before they lapse, a regulation could be saved. And the business has no idea until it happens. That decision may be made a few days before it would otherwise lapse. So businesses won't even get 15 months notice. They'll be completely in the dark. They'll just know that a load of regulations are for the chop. And they don't know which. Worse, a minister might tell them that a particular regulation is definitely staying or definitely going, only for someone to change their mind later. The government have got form for this. I was talking yesterday, I think, about the government changing their mind about border posts. This change of mind has cost UK ports nearly £500 million. Imagine what this chaos would cost British businesses across all sectors of our economy. The best case scenario is that it turns out the task is utterly impossible and that Truss somehow turns it into deciding that most of the regulations are suitable after all and maybe chops a couple just for show. Even that will no doubt cause problems for the businesses affected, but at least doesn't plunge the entire economy into chaos. Sorry, I meant more chaos. In fact, you would imagine that the regulations that the government would actually want to target will be worker and environmental protections, but there'll be a significant pushback against this. The government will seek to bypass this in exactly the same way as Boris Johnson did by not involving Parliament at all, using statutory instruments to change the law without involving the only branch of government in this country that is actually elected, the House of Commons. This will mean becoming less and less democratic. Now, my personal view is that this policy proposal of Truss is probably going to morph into a general election strategy. I don't think we're going to see this bonfire of regulations because it is both insane and impossible. Liz Truss may not be that bright, but I don't think she's insane. I am not entirely sure of that, however. As for achieving the impossible, she is most definitely not Alice. although she has disappeared down a rabbit hole. I can see this being the promise at the next general election. Oh, we got Brexit done, but now we need your vote to get the next bit of Brexit done. But this is to assume that Truss would have much control over the policy. She's based her leadership campaign on courting the ERG. She's basically in deep with the mob now. So it's not just a case of what she thinks will help her retain power, but what the ERG want to do as well. And although it's tempting to think they'd absolutely wanted to go for it, it may not actually be that simple. Because to achieve it, she will have to bypass Parliament. Now, the ERG are not actually all that keen on that. They have criticised Johnson in the past for doing just that. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.